Dunlap, who has a nonprofit called Habitats for Butterflies, which provides scientifically informed resources for the development and maintenance of breeding habitats for all U.S. butterflies, including monarchs. Her research analyzes thousands of butterfly photographs to ID the preferred nectar plants of 750 U.S. butterfly species. Her talk will cover how to establish a butterfly garden, develop habitats, and understand how butterflies locate and use a garden, along with some interesting facts about butterfly behaviors. She will share her expertise on which nectar plants, native and non-native, attract local butterflies, what makes them choose your garden, and practical tips to transform your space into a butterfly paradise. So please welcome Susan.
Hi. So I'm going to spend a few minutes giving you some background about my work and what got me into butterflies. Um, in 2001, I discovered a new way to identify plants that the vegetative growing tip of each plant is diagnostic for identification. I received 2 US patents for this discovery, so proceeded to develop an identification resource. As I accumulated knowledge about plants, I decided I wanted to develop a butterfly garden, so researched the available literature, where I found a huge hole. It just said, put nectar plants in the ground, or grow plants from the aster family, which of course is one of the largest families in the world. Well, that was not specific enough. I soon realized how deep the voids were, so decided to tackle the problem head on, recognizing that it too was basically an identification problem. In 2013, I went online and did 10,000 screen captures, say butterfly on nectar plant or zinnia with butterfly, and then organized all those images into a plant identification folders. The effort included constructing an image library of US butterflies, male and female, front and back, as at that time the images online had not been identified. I wrote a paper describing the results that you can access on habitatsforbutterflies.org. Um, and along the way, I got exposed to aggregators such as iNaturalist and GBIF, and to date have downloaded 1.85 million images of US butterflies, including 275,000 of monarchs. So I have personally curated nearly 2 million images. Yet again, I had to determine what to do with the information. So decided, in alignment with my own motivation to start the project, that the best course of action was to adopt the perspective of the gardener when applying the research. So tonight, let's talk about what it means to be a butterfly gardener. I'm going to start by orienting you to what butterflies need and build from there. The first thing to know is why butterflies come to a garden. In Marin County, roughly 3 dozen butterflies will come to gardens. About 20 of these are considered strong flyers, strong enough to cross unsuitable habitats and still find your garden. The remaining 15 may or may not be nearby at any given time. Most butterflies are not permanent residents. Migrants move from an overwintering site to a breeding ground before returning to their overwintering site. Itinerants simply fly about with no particular destination or endpoint in mind. Both migrants and itinerants move through the landscape and refuel where they can. They come to your garden because they're hungry. The second thing to know is that nectar is the invitation. The easiest way to invite butterflies into your garden is with nectar plants. Nectar plants feed the adult butterflies. When gardeners say, I see butterflies, but they don't stay, it may be because the butterfly is not fertile, so not seeking host plants, or the butterfly is male, so not seeking a place to lay eggs, or it is simply hungry, yet still interested in continuing its migration. But it is still true that nectar brings butterflies in and provides you with a good way to begin, a beginning that matters. For migratory and itinerant butterflies, nectar plants aren't just attractive, they're essential fuel, a fuel you can provide. Three, adding extra pieces. For gardeners who want butterflies to stay or return next season, adding host plants is the next step. Butterflies don't raise their young on nectar plants, they raise them on host plants. Host plants are the plants where females lay their eggs and where her caterpillars actually feed. They rarely double as nectar plants, Asclepius being one of the few exceptions. Without host plants, a butterfly may visit your garden, but it can't complete its life cycle there. So, four, the essential features of a butterfly habitat, what are they? At the simplest, there are three: host plants, nectar plants, and overwintering features. These are the foundation. Not every garden needs to master all three of these features at once, but every functioning habitat eventually includes them. 5. Overwintering, the quiet season that matters, because butterflies don't disappear in winter. Depending on the species, they overwinter as an egg, a chrysalis, or even as adults. They position themselves on branches, rolled in leaf litter, or tucked into the crevices of tree trunks. So, minimally, having an area of undisturbed leaf litter is a good overwintering tactic. This is often the simplest improvement a gardener can make to provide an overwintering feature. Nectar plants revisited with more information. Our current nectar plant list, based on the curation of 300,000 images, covers about 85% of US butterflies that feed on nectar. Even as we expanded our curation to nearly 2 million images, that list has held up remarkably well. These are not plants we assume butterflies should like. They're plants butterflies actually use. What's striking is that a relatively short list of plants does most of the work. So the advice here is simple. Start with a strong basic nectar list and build from there. How to build a habitat. Gardeners can take one of two paths to do this. And I think this is kind of the heart of the talk right here, okay? Because the first approach is proactive. Work with butterflies already visiting your neighborhood. Plant host plants for them now, along with basic nectar plants. And doing this puts you up a season. You can attract, feed, and nurture butterfly populations as early as this spring of 2026. The second approach starts differently. Instead of waiting to see who arrives, you invite a strong flyer. You grow host plants for one or more strong flying butterflies you want to attract and pair them with a complement of nectar plants. Both these approaches work. They simply start from a different foundation. So, when does the garden become a habitat? There's a threshold moment. If the host plants are healthy and support caterpillars, and you've provided blooming nectar plants throughout the active seasons of butterflies, mind you, then that butterfly has everything it needs to complete multiple generations. At that point, your garden is no longer just a fueling station, it's functional. The next refinement is timing. Timing separates good from excellent. If we stay aware of the bloom cycle and adjust our plantings so there are continuous blooms, then something really important happens. When many gardens offer nectar reliably, they begin to function as a refueling network, something migratory butterflies can actually use today. If we create refueling networks, we surpass what degraded wild meadows provide, not by size, but by reliability. This is where gardeners can begin to practice habitat gardening that is beneficial and environmentally sound. When nectar becomes reliable across many gardens, the question shifts from whether butterflies pass through to whether they stay and reproduce. What happens then when many gardeners do this? When host plants are added into this network, gardens shift from being fueling stations to reproductive habitat. If many gardeners do this across multiple neighborhoods within the migratory range of Northern California butterflies, we begin to transcend the capacity of unmanaged wild meadows. Strong flying migratory butterflies are especially responsive to fragmented habitats, the kind we can create intentionally in local neighborhoods. As these habitats become more connected, a broader range of butterflies, including non-migratory species, also begin to find them supportive. They stay. So eventually, we can create a different kind of meadow. At that point, connected gardens function as a suburban version of a healthy meadow. Not a replica, but a stable living system that supports butterfly survival over time. And that's the shift from planting flowers to building habitat, from hoping butterflies appear to understanding why they do. And before moving on to a new topic, I want to mention that two studies recommend a ratio of 50-50% host and nectar plants. That's about 10 plants each, which works well for wildland restoration. But in my experience, suggests that garden spaces may benefit from a different approach. As a gardener of a managed habitat, I suggest working with a host plant mass is useful. One large vine, such as Passiflora, is sufficient, or a handful of smaller plants. But having to go with 50-50 ratio, you don't want 50 passiflora plants, okay? And now a bit about plants. They're remarkably adaptive. Place a sun-loving perennial near the drip line of a shrub. Even in semi-shade, it will grow, bloom, and produce nectar, and offer a butterfly a quick escape if a predator appears. This structure makes the butterfly feel at ease. It fits their natural tendency to move, fluttering, to feed, find mates, follow scent plumes, or flee from danger. In some ways, managed gardens can outperform wild spaces when it comes to nectar reliability. Gardeners can respond quickly, adding nectar when butterflies appear, adjusting plant availability as the season unfolds. We can plant to match the butterfly's timing, not the calendar. Early spring blossoms? No. What matters isn't an early spring bloom, it's nectar when the butterfly arrives. My personal habitat journey evolved as I experimented to figure out how to succeed. Initially, I found it easier to create habitats if the host plant is relatively straightforward and in cultivation. That's one of the reasons I planted Passiflora, because it could attract the Gulf fritillary to come to my garden and reside there year-round. The good thing about the Gulf fritillary is that it's an avid garden visitor and will attract other butterflies. In fact, most of the Gulf fritillary population comes to suburban and urban gardens, so it's a smart butterfly to start with. Another one that's relatively straightforward to attract is Pieris rapei, the cabbage white. Its host plant is nasturtium, so another plant that is easy to have around and gently self-seeding. By the way, the naturalizing attribute of a host plant is a good thing, as the plant mass consumed by caterpillars will be easily replenished by the growth propensity of the plant itself. Having it available will keep that butterfly coming back as a season-long resident. Anise swallowtail is another. You put fennel or anise in the ground, and it's going to come and live with you. So I would start with the ones that come to your garden and where the host plant is straightforward. Ones in cultivation that are relatively easy to manage as a gardener without getting out of hand. It allows you to putter. At this point, a dozen different butterflies come through the garden one year or another. It's quite a joy to have them around. So these are the basic guidelines as far as the plants themselves are concerned, and what I recommend. Put a basic set of nectar plants in your garden and a targeted set of host plants. Now I want to spend a few minutes talking about how the butterfly finds you. What goes on that brings them into your garden? Well, initially it's by olfaction. The plant, such as the wildly popular Bootlesia, will send out a plume that is sensed by the butterfly as they're flying about. Butterflies have olfactory sensors on their antennae and their legs. Once they detect an olfactory plume of a nectar plant that appeals to them, they will track that plume. This is why they fly back and forth. They'll go back and forth, fluttering back and forth to follow and track the plume, to locate the plant and the source of nectar. Mind you, they're doing this from sometimes 300 to 500 feet up in the air. So a strong plume is very, very important to draw them into a habitat. So once they find your habitat with this flowering nectar plant, they'll look for host plants. They say, okay, this is a great place for us to feed. Now, is it also a great place for us to lay eggs? Well, here's the thing. Not to worry if the host plant is not in bloom, because the butterfly will locate a host plant, land on it, and then tap her feet to expose the plant's chemistry. Sensors on her feet interpret this chemistry on contact. She can discern whether or not it has the right chemical mix to serve as a host plant for her larvae. This is why, if you're trying to attract monarchs in spring and your Asclepias is not yet in bloom, it doesn't matter. If you have a robust set of nectar plants that bring them in, they will find the host plant on their own. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you about monarchs. Here's a crucial point about monarchs that shapes everything about their habitat needs. They're a migratory species, and because so, their impulse to migrate is stronger than their impulse to stick around locally. When they come out of diapause in spring, they start flying towards the Sierra foothills and will stop to breed and feed along the way. So, what do you want to have in the garden for them in spring? Well, we know we want to have both host plants and nectar plants, and the host plant does not need to be in bloom when the female arrives. So you know you don't need to worry about whether you've got Asclepias blossoms, but you do want other blooming nectar plants to entice her to come to your garden to begin with. So she's in your garden, she lays some eggs, and then what might happen is if you have a fairly generous amount of spring flowering nectar plants, she will go over, replenish herself, fuel up again, and she might stick around and lay some more eggs. This interaction between host and nectar plant, or going back and forth, can result in a boost of the egg-laying population by as much as 144%. So it is definitely worth doing. The other thing that can contribute to her procreative activity before she flies off to the Sierras is if she detects another habitat within 200 to 300 feet of your dwelling. She will then go through the same process. You might have a neighbor down the street that also has an active habitat. The monarch might simply go over there, lay some more eggs, and then lay more eggs after replenishing herself again before continuing her trip to the Sierras. So this is a second opportunity to increase her egg laying. Her lifetime dispersal of hundreds of eggs won't go to waste when she becomes fertile. She can dispose of them in a spring habitat, which means all the caterpillars that emerge out of this one hosting event will generate new caterpillars and new butterflies, who will also reproduce during that same spring and summer and are part of the population increase for that particular year. It's very helpful to boost their population when we do this. And Bay Area gardeners are in a good position to increase the procreative activity of monarchs, providing them with relatively secure habitats full of plantings that can improve their survival. Then in late August, early September, monarchs shift from being very, very active and reproducing in mass to being overwhelmed by the instinct to return home. So diapause actually begins in the Sierra foothills, migratory diapause. They shift from being proactive sexually to being less competitive, and they aggregate together to migrate back to Santa Cruz, usually in clusters. So we know then that in September, October, and November, they are migrating back to the California coast, and they need to refuel along the way. So what can we provide for them to support their fall migration? What refueling stations need to be in place? The visual data shows that they feed as a group, they aggregate as a group, and sleep as a group. So larger plantings of fall flowering blossoms will assist them in shoring up their fat stores and acquire a lot of body fat for overwintering. They need to eat a lot during the migratory period. Solidago is an especially good choice to put in the ground for this because it will form a naturalized patch. And the more you can put in, the better. Symphyotrichum is also a worthy fall nectar resource, though not as effective in supporting group feeding. If you do have other fall flowering plants in your garden, leave them there because these likely offer nectar support for monarchs and other pollinators, those seeking food during the waning part of the season. I think it's important to talk a little bit about the location of useful monarch spring habitats. There is no peer-reviewed scientific literature dealing with this topic. The consensus from 2 of 3 national authorities is that any habitat can be developed that is a reasonable distance from an overwintering site. In Marin County, that distance is 5 miles because of the inland location of one of your primary overwintering sites. In Santa Cruz County, that's 1 to 2 miles is sufficient. And in other inland Bay Area counties, there are no limitations. So we do encourage you to develop spring habitats for monarchs, especially as we know it can boost that year's population. And then I have a few comments about tropical milkweed. Numerous papers have been written about it relative to monarchs, and it's a topic for 3 reasons. The butterfly is more likely to get infected with parasites. It develops smaller wings. They're not as effective for their wind-guided migration and may undermine our migratory restoration goals. On the West Coast, where we're hoping to restore migratory populations, cutting tropical milkweed down in late fall will ensure female monarchs are not enticed to create a year-round habitat that develops populations with smaller wings, a heavier parasite load, and caterpillars that may not survive a cold winter. So, this is my closing slide that I just had to show you this wonderful letter that I got from the IRS that we are now a bona fide nonprofit. And you can reach out to me at susan@habitatsforbutterflies.org. And I hope you visit our website. And I wanted to also say that all the images in this show are courtesy of GBIF. So I'm very grateful to them for their work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Susan. So we have a few questions in the chat, and also Stacy, our vice president, was kind enough to post some links in there to your website and also to CalScape, which is a program by the state CNPS organization that lists California native plants that butterflies use. And Hilary Monte asks, do these monarchs who go towards the Sierra fly through the Bay Area?
Yes, very definitely.
Yes, okay.
The whole Bay Area.
The whole Bay Area, right.
Yep.
And Laura Martini thanks you. And does anyone else just want to chime in with any questions or comments?
I just wanted to say to Susan, this is Helen Lindquist. I remember Susan from her work on the meristems of plants, particularly cacti. I'm not sure how many years ago that was, Susan, but
Helen,
I was thrilled to see you turn up with butterflies.
It was a long time ago. Yeah. I mean, I think that was in 2000 or or somewhere around there.
So it had to be a way back then.
It's nice to see your name.
Craig Dreeman asks if you have a plant list available on your website.
We do. And also I encourage people to email me and I'll send them a short list of the dominant plant list. And then also I can let them know about the strong flyers in your county. That might be useful too.
Thank you. And he also asks, what are the Western monarchs overwintering nectar plants that are native?
Monarch overwintering nectar plants.
Are they nectaring much during the actual winter? I think
no,
it's the
see,
fall
that's
migration.
it's spring through fall where they
Yeah.
would need nectar plants. Asclepius is one of the dominant ones actually. And
Right.
Curcium, of course.
Curcium, the thistles. And she already mentioned the native aster.
Solidago's up there.
And goldenrods, right?
Solidago. Yeah.
And Janet Burnham has a question about puddling of butterflies and how to create that habitat in the garden.
Puddling is a unique behavior, and it's mostly a male butterfly activity. But yeah, ideally, I mean, if you want to attract a whole flock of butterflies, then yeah, you want to have some puddling happening there too. And they need trace minerals. Again, this is mostly a male requirement that they acquire trace minerals and they pass it along to the female when they're mating.
So basically just creating a depression that doesn't drain too freely where water can mix with soil.
With soil, yeah, or with your compost pile, right?
And
good question.
Are there any specific butterfly species that need extra special attention from gardeners?
the rare and endangered ones most certainly could use some help, but I do think that it takes a while to attract the non-migratory species to a particular habitat. And that's why, appealing to the ones that you do find already in your neighborhood will help build your garden. It'll become recognized as a habitat within the butterfly community. So you attract the two basic ones, the Paris rapi and Gulf fritillary, and then others will start coming. I mean, it took about 5 years, but I finally got some rare ones coming through this last year. So the pygmy blue of all things.
Terrific.
And it's so tiny, I thought it was a day-flying moth, but I said, no, moths don't fly in day. What is this? And I could not capture it on a camera, even though I had one staring at it. It was moving so quickly. But it was definitely a pygmy blue. Yeah.
And do you have any particular recommendations for part sun plants for butterflies?
I think that you got to try the strategy I mentioned in the talk, where you find the outer limit of what a sun-loving plant can be grown in. I mean, even zinnias can be grown in semi-shade. So I would just maybe take a pot and move it around in the garden until you find its stress point. But having escape hatches for butterflies is very, very helpful for them to be able to escape birds and spiders and other kinds of creatures that want to eat them.
So what is the best escape hatch?
Pardon?
By an escape hatch, you mean
Giving them a place to like if they're sunning themselves or they're perched on a blossom and nectaring, and you have a shrub very nearby, then they can escape into that shrub. A zinnia potted underneath a pittosporum or something like that. It's just give them an escape hatch. Because they're vulnerable when they're nectaring. That's one of the times when they're most still and they're not fluttering about as usual. And they're fluttering to maintain contact with their environment. So typically when they're moving about, they can actually smell all the surrounding aromas of any creature nearby. But there's some insects that I think that are quite clever at disguising the broadcasting of their own aroma. So it's going to save them from birds because those can't disguise their smell. But yeah, butterflies are vulnerable. Yeah.
Tom Hammond asks for some clarification about the distance from overwintering sites.
About what for the overwintering?
The mileage distance,
Oh yeah,
which
yeah,
in
yeah.
some areas is 1 mile and others
Yeah, in
5.
Marin County, you guys have an overwintering site that's more kind of inland, so to speak. It's not exactly along the coast. And because of that, there's a larger perimeter around that overwintering site that you have to be cautious about. And one authority in particular was very adamant that Marin was vulnerable that way. So yeah, you don't want to grow a Slepius in that radius. But other counties are not so close to the overwintering sites, so we can put a Slepius in the ground. Yeah. I mean, I have one neighbor that's put in some of the ones that don't die back during the winter, and I'm monitoring that carefully because I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, I think we'd be interested in knowing what that inland overwintering site is. I think we're mostly familiar with the overwintering sites in Bolinas area and historically also at Muir Beach.
Yeah, I
But,
think
but
it's
those are
important.
on the
But
actual coast. Yeah, we'll try to
well,
learn.
no, it was further inland than Bolinas proper.
Yeah, we'll have to.
But yeah, I'll have to share
is.
that with you. It doesn't come to mind. Sorry.
That's okay. And Loretta mentions that coyote mint is a good when it blooms into the fall, that makes a good nectaring plant.
I'm
for
sorry, what makes a good
coyote
nectar?
mint, monardella,
Ah, well,
the native
that's not on the
low-growing.
native, and that's not on the dominant list, I can tell you that.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, maybe because it's not as commonly grown as it might be.
Well, it might be highly useful in a very specific location. That
Mhm.
just that generally across the country or even across the
Oh,
state,
no, yeah,
it's not
it's
up there.
primarily a Western.
Yeah.
plant.
Well,
Uh,
it'd be curious for me to look it up. I can dig around in the Lightroom database.
Right, we have a couple of species native to Marin and different ones in the Sierra and so forth. And Christina Marin asks if you have a favorite butterfly species.
Well, I have to say I'm partial to the Gulf fritillary, mainly because it was my first inhabitant of my own garden. Yeah, but there's so many to like, and the other thing is that have the privilege of looking at all these images, that I fall in love with every single one of them. And in fact, it's not hard for me to like go browsing through like, all the images of a particular butterfly and look for ones where their personality seems to be on display. And it's not hard to find. Every single one of them has this wonderful face. Even this the image that we're resting on now, I guess you're still seing this skipper.
The skipper,
On,
yes, they have such
yeah.
bold.
I mean, look at that. I mean, look at this. Just wonderful. And that proboscis dipping into a tiny blossom. I mean, I don't know. What's not to like?
David Long asks, what is the overlap between good butterfly plants and plants good for bee pollinators?
You know what? I'm just starting to look into that, and there is a lot of overlap, and there are some the overlap that I'm particularly following up on is the overlap between the bee host plants and butterfly nectar plants, because there is overlap there. So if we can focus our nectar plantings to also support native bees, then I think that would just be fantastic.
Yeah, and a lot of bees visit for pollen, of course, primarily, I guess, plants in the sunflower family. So thistles are good for both butterflies and bees.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Who did all the
I now have thistle growing in my yard.
Right.
I mean, I don't let my neighbors see that, but I mean, no, I'm teasing.
Well,
It's
we do have
actually
some
in the front yard.
native thistles. They're just a little harder to find in nurseries.
Yeah.
Craig Dreeman asks, who did all the viewing of the 2 million images and sorted them out?
I did.
You did.
I did that.
Impressive.
I've been at it for 13 years now. Yeah.
Fantastic.
But the GBIF material was heaven for me.
Can you explain what that is? GBIF.
GBIF, all capital letters. It's a resource. It's an aggregator. And actually, most of the iNaturalist material that's scientific grade has made its way over to GBIF. And GBIF organizes it in a fantastic fashion. You can screen it by the butterfly family or going down to the state level. You can do it by country, filter it by country. And then I've downloaded all those images and then imported them into Lightroom and started manipulating them in there.
So
And
they're open access images?
Yes, it is. I mean, I have never seen anybody denied access to GBIF.
Wonderful.
And of course, I log in as a user, and that's been important because then they provide me with download information, and I can give them credits in certain ways, and that gets back then to the iNaturalist community. So GBIF is an international organization, and they're supported by governments from all over the world. It's a fantastic resource.
Wonderful resource. Julie Bongers mentions that in the East Bay, there have been monarchs overwintering at Ardenwood Down down near Coyote Point, Fremont, and also at Aquatic Park in Berkeley. So a couple of sites on the bay.
Yes, but the butterfly counts are not very high at these places. Maybe 100 or something like that. I mean, I'm just throwing out a number, but it's not a remarkable site. I mean, yes, but it also means that there is some other sites that are worth exploring and visiting and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jill Templeton remembers when she was a child 60 years ago in Mill Valley that monarchs overwintered on eucalyptus on Strawberry Point, which is on the bay valley.
Not anymore.
No,
It's no,
not there anymore. No,
not anymore. You're talking about in San Francisco, right?
no, in Marin County, Mill Valley,
Oh.
but
Now
on
that
the bay side.
I think there's only one site that is dynamic right at the moment in Marin County, and that's inland from Bolinas, but yeah, it is in
Venus is
Bolinas area.
active. The counts have been low, however.
I think the Xerces Society has a special map that you can log into. You have to navigate kind of deep in their website to find it, but it is there.
Okay, we'll do that. And Stacy mentions passiflora. What
Yes.
native plants would we use instead of passiflora? But passiflora is specifically as a larval food plant for the Gulf fritillary, which
That's
wasn't
right.
originally native to this area. It simply followed the plantings of passiflora to the West Coast.
But the Gulf fritillary is not native to California either.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that it was the Gulf fritillary butterfly following the passiflora plantings that brought it to California.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So there isn't that's
No, there's no
for that
substitute.
butterfly.
It's just like asking for a substitute for monarchs with Asclepius. It's, you don't go there. Can't do that.
Eva Buxton asks, how many eggs will one mating occurrence fertilize?
One mating.
In other words, once a female has been mated with, how many eggs does that fertilize? Is that known?
I think with monarchs, if that's the question, I think they have more than one mating event per life cycle. But it's my understanding that over their lifetime, maybe 600 eggs, something along that line.
Okay, so it might be, more than one mating occurrence.
Yeah.
Providing them.
That's why she's pursued across the country.
And okay, I mentioned that Ardenwood and Aquatic Park are by the bay. Craig asks, has another question, is your work going to be archived at some university in the future?
I'm sorry, the question was what about an archive?
Whether your work is going to be archived at some university in the future.
I hope so.
Okay. Meanwhile, it will be on her website. So
yeah. Well, we're adding more all the time, and you guys can give me input on what you'd like to see. We're just starting, and we're just figuring out, how to reach out to people. And personally, I think gardeners are going to be my primary audience. I just because they're the biggest part of the solution, right? And yeah, that's what I believe. So the more gardeners that I talk to and reach out to, if you guys let me know what you want to hear about, then that would be wonderful.
Great. And David Brin mentions that Mare Island in San Francisco Bay or in the Delta, that's in the Delta, isn't it? Has or had an overwintering site.
Really?
Wow. And so I don't know if that's used anymore. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Muir Beach was another overwintering site, but hasn't been for the last perhaps 40 years. I think it was a little more recent than that, but I can't swear to that.
Well, I think restoring the population has got to be the primary goal right now.
Yeah. So everything we can do from nectar plants to larval host plants would be helpful. And Susan, just as a parting comment, if you might explain the image behind yourself to the I was fortuitous to hear that. I think everyone's curious.
It's a painting of an ostracoda. So it's an
tell them what an
ancient
ostracoda
marine
is.
creature that
Ancient
I
marine
think is
creature.
extinct right now, but it's a painting on a panel. It's 3 by 4 feet. And I was told by Chat and Claude to get the painting right behind me, a foot behind me, in order to block out the rest of the room. So that's what I did.
Certainly more interesting than the blurred background some of us use.
Well, I was hoping that would be true,
Yeah.
but thanks for asking.
All right. Well, thank you so much for Susan for Susan for the presentation.
Thank
And,
you.
You're welcome. Thank you for
yeah,
inviting me.
I'm hoping now you'll get some traffic to your new nonprofit and website, and
Oh, that would be wonderful.
yeah. So thank you again. And next month, we're actually going to have a presentation by Greg Richardson of the Nature Conservancy, and we'll be talking about some of these issues out there at Point Reyes National Seashore. I hope you can join us then. So good night for now.
Good night.
Bye-bye.